what's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer, and it's been a while. It's been a few weeks since I've had a show. I've had some challenges with scheduling guests and what have you, but I am psyched to be back. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming Abe Tirona from Coral Euphoria. Abe runs coraleuphoria.com, the website he uses to sell his high-end and high-quality SPS frags. He also has a successful YouTube channel. We're just talking about that before the show. That was started a couple of years ago with over 8,500 subs. And if you've ever been on his website or seen any of his YouTube videos, then you already know that Abe has the touch for SPS. So, Abe, man, welcome to the show, and thanks for being my guest.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Keith. Thanks for that very nice introduction, too.
Hey, well deserved, well deserved. So, folks, this is a treat. Abe is obviously got talent in terms of SPS. I love SPS, so Abe and I are going to have a real down and dirty conversation about keeping SPS, and we'd love to get your input. So, welcome everybody. Saint Nova, Reef BOL, T40 Reef. Thanks, folks, for coming. Reggie Perryman. We got a lot of folks coming in right now, and we really thank you very much. Queen City Reefs and more. Hey guys, both of you are what I am aspiring to follow as far as coral growth success. Well, hopefully we can pass along and impart some of our knowledge and specifically talk to Abe in terms of what he does and how he likes to keep SPS tanks. Reef Keeper, hey, what's up, man? Thanks for coming back and checking out the show here. But I don't know, Abe. Hopefully everything is cool with you out there on the left coast. Got COVID going on. We've got wildfires. I don't know if that's something that's impacting you. Hopefully you're staying safe out there. It's not a safe world we're living in these days.
No, apparently it's not. First of all, I just want to say thanks for all the support to everybody who came out to watch the stream and who subscribes to my channel. I appreciate it a lot. But yeah, for the most part, we're good down here. San Diego is a special place. We're not like the rest of California, I like to think of it. The weather is always a little cooler when it's too hot in the rest of California, and it's a little warmer down here when it's too cold in the rest of California. But I think we got blessed by some good winds to where not a lot of the ash is hitting us down here. So I'm good, man. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right, Abe. So we got a lot of ground to cover because I got a lot of questions, and I'm sure everybody that's watching has a lot of questions. But as you may know, a lot of what I do in terms of starting off these shows is I always ask my guests in terms of how they got into the hobby or into the business. So Abe, man, what's the scoop there? How did you get into reef keeping? What's your story?
Well, really, it's not too different from everybody else. I, kept a freshwater fish tank at the age of 13, South American cichlids like Jack Dempsey's and convicts and Oscars. And that was like junior high school for me. Around high school in the early 90s is when I started, seeing a lot more saltwater aquariums. And one of the big things that got me into the hobby was just seeing that symbiotic relationship between a clownfish and anemone.
Yeah.
So that's really what got me into it. And so during high school, I kind of dabbed into marine saltwater type stuff. And but for me, it was a big time failure. I don't think too many people were successful during that time. But after I got out of the Navy in 99 and I actually had a little bit money is when I was able to afford like a proper aquarium or reef tank. And that's really about the same time when the reef hobby really started to take off. Like the whole Berlin method came out where people were just throwing in a bunch of live rock, like real live rock from the ocean.
Yeah.
And we started implementing protein skimmers, and strong lighting was we discovered how important strong lighting was back then. And that's really when the hobby really took off for me, just like everybody else.
Yeah, it's an interesting way in terms of how you kind of get into it. You start small and maybe you start with a fresh water tank, and then before you know it, it just kind of evolves into something bigger and better, and you just keep progressing along the way, and it seems like it's never ending. So, Abe, I watch your channel, and first of all, I love your videos. They're very well done. They're very educational, and you've you practice some methods that you know I've not done myself personally, and there's some things that you do I think that are really really neat and interesting, and I'd say that you know, maybe some of them are not common. But let's you shot a video of your systems for us, and kind of like a walkthrough of your two tanks. So let's maybe we should start off with that. We'll watch the video, and that'll kind of like lead to a more natural conversation in terms of questions about what we saw in those videos. But let's do that, and then we'll come back and talk about it. So let me roll this video here.
– 120 gallons, so 4 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. It's lit by a DIY LED strip up front, but the main lighting is an 8 bulb T5 fixture, ATI. It's mainly Acroporas. I do have some LPS and Montes in here, but they're just in there really to add some color variation that Acropora don't typically have. It is bare bottom. I just find that easier to deal with. There's about 50 to 60 pounds of Fiji live rock. About 12 fish in here, 4 big ones and the rest are small. For flow, currently I have 2 MP40s. You can see one in the back left there, as well as in the front right. I do have a Tunzi wave box in here. I know those things are kind of bulky, but I do like the rocking motion that they do provide. So as far as filtration, I have this 40-gallon breeder that I turned into a sump. The water comes down and goes into that filter sock right there in the center. That's a Bubble King Mini 180. Had that thing for over 10 years now. I love it. I am a big proponent of RoHo-Phos, so I run RoHo-Phos in this Phosband reactor here. If you look at the output of the reactor, it's very minimal. So I don't run it aggressively. This is a bucket refugium. There's Chaeto in there, and it's lit by a little Kessel. The next compartment is a bubble trap where I have a bunch of rock rubble for additional biological filtration. And then finally the return pump section where I have a gravity fed auto top off. That's just a float valve, standard PVC float valve. And I dose alkalinity, calcium, and magnesium. Those are those containers there. And the dosing pumps are up there. It looks like a lot, but I'm only using 3 heads. And the whole system is pretty much run off an Apex. I use the temperature control on the Apex to control the fans and heater. And I use the Apex to control the outlets. But that's pretty much it. I like to keep things as simple as possible. So this is my 140 gallon. It's a custom tank. The dimensions are 5 feet by 3 feet. And it's 16 inches high. Pretty much all acros. It pretty much functions as a grow out tank, but I tried to make it look as nice as possible. That's why I added the live rock and took out the frag rack. The main difference between this tank and the 120 is the lighting. For lighting, I have 2 250 watt metal halides, and that's supplemented with a bunch of LED fixtures. The fixtures in the corners are DIY fixtures. And in the middle, I have a Reef Breeders fixture. For flow, I have 4 6105s, Tunzies. There's probably about 60 pounds of live rock in here. Maybe about 14 fish. Bare bottom. So as far as filtration goes, it's similar to the 120. I have a 40 breeder as a sump. It's a little tighter in here, but you can see the filter sock. That's a Vertex Alpha 200. There's a Phosban reactor with roll phos in there as well. You can see my bucket refugium right there in the center. The next compartment is a little bit of rock rubble. And then that's the return section. And I also dosed calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium. And there's the apex there. Dosers are up there. And that's pretty much it.
And we are back. So, all right, we got a lot to talk about here, Abe. I think one of the things that I wanted to start off with is lighting. So on the 120, you're doing T5s with LEDs, and on the 140, you're doing halides and some LEDs. So talk to us about why you're running those certain combinations of lighting for both the on the 120 and the 140. What are your thoughts on lighting? I mean, obviously you're using combinations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in general, I think, each modality has sort of its strengths and its own weaknesses. So to me, the best lighting period would be to incorporate everything, halides, fluorescent lights, or T5s, I should say, and LEDs. But obviously that's not possible. You probably need a big tank to set that up, and you're going to have this crazy retrofit structure. But yeah, so I'm all about just taking advantage of the strengths of the different lightings. I You probably noticed that I run mainly T5 supplemented with LEDs and mainly halide supplemented with LEDs. It's not that I have anything against LEDs. It's just my experience in the past. I was never really successful with running them by themselves. And like I said, I think LED strengths are the color that it brings out of the corals. So, I mean, that's why I have it as supplemental lighting. I think that, again, I'm not trying to bash LEDs, but I think for overall health, in my experience, I think T5s and halides are better for acropora health. But, that's just me. Don't want to stir any pots up here, but because I know a lot of people have successful LED only tanks, so I don't want to say anything about that. It's just that my own experience is just tending to go with T5s or metal halides as the main lighting.
Let me just ask a question of people that are watching. Am I coming in really low here in terms of my sound? Is that what you guys are hearing? Let me. Is that better? Can you guys hear me better now if I turn it up a little bit? Anybody that's watching wants to put a comment in there. I think that's going to be better in terms of my sound. Hopefully. Anyway, yeah, listen, I am a tried and true halide guy, metal halides. I've been using metal halides for the majority of the time that I've been keeping reef tanks. Halide T5 combination, and I am not, so for me in terms of LEDs, I've never done really LEDs as the main part of the lighting for any of my reef tanks. But my new tank build, that will be the main source of lighting in terms of the LEDs. So I'm excited about doing that, but I think there are advantages in all the different types of lighting out there, and obviously in terms of what you were showing with your tanks, you've had some great success with them, and some folks have had great success using just T5s, and some folks have had great success using LEDs. It's a lot more than just the lighting, but the lighting is a big part in terms of having success with SPS. I think that's not no doubt about that.
I agree. I think the one thing I forgot to say about the kind of disclaimer about LEDs is like I never tried like Radions or the big name brand LEDs. The only time that I've tried them, I've used kind of the cheap stuff, or I was using my own DIY fixture, which was like 10 years ago. So I don't know for sure.
So in terms of what I saw in your tanks there, you've got a bare bottom tanks, right? So you're not using sand, and you mentioned live rock. So when you started those tanks, was it actually live rock, or was that dead rock that became live that you put into those tanks? How did you start those tanks out?
Yeah, the the term live rock is so confusing nowadays. No, those rocks were definitely dead. Yeah, they're just Fiji rock that was dead, pretty much.
So what was your process, and how long did it take for you to get those tanks up and running? Because I tried dead rock one time, and it didn't go well. But my experience is really using live rock, and you can get the tank cycled pretty quickly with live rock, and you can get SPS can be you know in terms of my experience, you can get them colored up and growing much faster than if you went the other route. But in terms of the time frame for you starting a tank with dead rock, what period of time was it before you started putting corals in there and having success with the SPS and seeing the growth in the colors, or did it take a while?
Well, I mean, it definitely took a while in the long run. I'll talk about the 140 because I set that one up last. That was the last one I set up, and it probably took from like actually setting up the tank to getting Acropora to live in there. Took about 4 months, and I didn't. The thing with that tank is I didn't seed it with any rock from the previous tank because I had like blue clove polyps in the 120, and I was also trying to keep out the vermeted
Yeah.
snails. So I used all dead rock and I just try to cycle it anew. But yeah, about 4 months to get acros to live. That's just live. But it probably took about a year for them to really start thriving and getting good color. So it definitely takes a while. And I don't, cycling a tank nowadays is it's definitely a challenge. Like you said, we don't have the benefit of real rock from the ocean, which really was what made us successful back in the 2000s and late 90s. Um, and I'm not one who uses like bottle bacteria. I don't really think that's needed. But for my 140 specifically, um, well, let me just say it like this. In my opinion, right after you decide that you're going to make a new tank or set up a new tank, after you've decided the size, the very next thing that you should do is buy rock and start cycling it. Even before you get the tank, throw it in a bucket, and that's going to help get that tank going a lot quicker. That's actually what I did with that tank. So, when I say that the acros lived within the 4 month mark, that's only probably, or that's partly because that I was already cycling rock. I was already preparing for that. So I just had a bunch of live rock in a bucket, and I threw a little cheap, you know, um, compact fluorescent light over it, and I just threw some nasty stuff in there to get the cycle going. So
Like
yeah,
dead shrimp or something? Is that how you essentially try to get that going? Yeah.
exactly. So I probably did that, maybe 2 or 3 months before I actually set that tank up. I already got the rock going.
Did you run into any issues in terms of dinos and all that other fun stuff that some seemingly always pop up when you start with a dry rock only tank?
I didn't, and I've had that problem with almost every tank that I've set up since going back over a decade. So I'm well aware of that dino problem. But there are two things that I think this is just obviously my theory because dinos is a big mystery
Yeah.
for a lot of people, I guess. But number one is I definitely run UV nowadays when I start a new tank or I'm interrupting the bioload. Um, and the second thing is that starting the rock early is definitely a good idea if you want to prevent dinos because it's all about promoting the right beneficial biological filtration
Right.
and the other thing too is that I don't know if you caught it, but I said I just threw on a little cheap compact fluorescent house bulb over the
Right.
top just to get some lighting over it. I think it's important, in my opinion, it's important to not blast like fresh, dry, dead rock with too much light. Because if you combine like strong light and you combine that with nutrients, that to me is what's going to start dino.
Right.
So UV, starting the rock early and not blasting with it too much light in the beginning are important to prevent dinos, in my opinion.
Right. Any other advice in terms of folks that are starting their tanks with dry rock only in terms of how to avoid the uglies?
I mean, you just really have to go slow. You can't just start dumping in stuff, and it all just takes
Yeah.
time.
Going back to the lighting, somebody had a question about what T5 combination you're running. I think it was Great Bearded Reef.
Yeah. So for over my 120, it's an 8 bulb fixture. Pretty much there are five Blue Plus, there are two actinics, and there's one GE 6500K. And it sounds like a lot of blue, but that GE is pretty white or almost yellow, so it balances out nicely when I have all the bulbs on.
Yeah. What in terms of how often do you change out the T5 bulbs?
I do about a
Yeah,
year.
about a year.
I know that there was that it was a BRS video where they sort of tested the life of the bulb, where they said, oh, there's only a certain decrease in par after 18 months or whatever. I actually tried that, but I don't, I honestly don't think it's only about par. I feel like colors start to drop off too after a year. So, I don't really care about extending the bulb life an extra 6 months. I just change it out because I think that I get better results if they're fresh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, all right, a couple more questions, Abe, in terms of what we're talking about, or what you were talking about in the video, and I mentioned bare bottom. What's your reasoning behind going bare bottom versus sand? I think a lot of people like the sand because they like the look of it, aesthetic wise, and some just can't get their heads wrapped around having a bare bottom tank. But what's your thinking in terms of going bare bottom versus sand?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, I love the look of sand. I mean, yeah, if I could have sand and keep it clean and keep it even, I would totally go for it. But those are the issues for me is that with the flow that I want to give my acros, there's no way that I'm going to keep that sand bed even, and I would just not rather deal with that. Um, so that's one reason. The other reason is that I really think that removing detritus is important. This is just another one of those wacky theories I have. I feel like I kind of imagine this in my head that detritus releases some nasty crap that our corals hate. That's just how I think of it. So the bottom line is I just try to get rid of it. And being bare bottom, it just makes it that much
Do
easier.
you find there to be less biodiversity with the bare bottom tank, or is it just? I think the one thing with the bare bottom tank, one of the things that you have to deal with is that it will take longer for that tank to mature, right? If you do dry rock plus bare bottom, but I guess the question is how much does the sand add to the biological filtration of that tank? Is it significant? I mean, I like to keep a 1 or 2 inch sand, in my tanks, but is that enough to make a difference? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think I know the answer either. As far as like adequate biological filtration, like I don't know if it. I mean, it probably does add biodiversity because it's just a different environment for the different microorganisms to live, as opposed to living on the rock surface. I'm pretty sure of that. I mean, it makes sense. But the question, I guess, is that biodiversity necessary to have a thriving aquapore dominated tank? I mean, I would think probably not, but who
So
knows?
you've never
Yeah.
done a sand? Have you tried to do a sand before?
And the last time I ran sand was like in 2008, and I think I think I was having a dyno problem at that time. So I took out all the sand. We didn't really know what we were doing back then, but I took out the sand at that point, and then since then I really didn't never look back. But
So we got a couple of more questions sprinkling in here, and we'll let's address a couple of these, and then we'll dive back into some other topics here. So one question is, all right, producer Reef. Hey guys, how do you deal with algae on the frag plugs, especially since the coral on the plugs are growing? Any thoughts there, Abe? In terms, do you have? We didn't see any of your prop systems there in terms of keeping frags in dedicated frag tanks, but I assume that you do have that, right?
yeah, I didn't mention it, but there's a 40 breeder plumb to the 120. I didn't think it was exciting enough for me to mention, but yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that question.
I guess the
I think my
I guess the
tangs
question
are.
is, do you have any issues with not just on the frag plugs, but algae in those frag tanks? I think it can be tough in terms of frag tanks because you've got racks or maybe right, and it's tough to kind of get all the detritus out underneath the rack. let's ask it a
Oh, I
different way.
see.
How do you set up a frag tank and try to keep it algae free?
Yeah, no, I understand the question now. Yeah, I misunderstood it. Yeah, totally. You just need an herbivore in there. You totally need a tank and a frag tank, in my opinion. I have a quarantine tank that's only 20 gallons, and I can't put a tank in there. If it was up to the tank police, I don't want to put one in there anyway. It's too small. But yeah, I definitely have algae problems in there. Like I have bryopsis in there, but yeah, I don't know because the snails don't eat everything, right? Hermit crabs don't eat everything. You definitely need a tang, in my opinion, or a fox face. So it's hard when you have a small
Yeah,
frag
it's
tank.
interesting because I have two. I have a grow out frag tank. So I got some colonies and there's one frag tank that I use as a grow out tank, and then I've got another tank that's just dedicated for frags and plugs. And it's interesting because I do have tangs in those tanks, and some tangs like to eat certain algae and others don't. So it's always like kind of a crapshoot, right? I mean, if you throw in a fox face or you throw in a yellow tang or a yellow-eyed coal tang, it's not a guarantee that they're gonna eat the same kind of algae that another yellow tang or coal tang will eat. It's I find it odd, and I think that sometimes you got to kind of throw in multiple tangs at once and keep your fingers crossed that one of them is going to do their job.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree.
All right, so then we got Saint Nova. Abe, do you think your acros would do just as well with your par numbers under LEDs as under T5s, or does it not matter?
I guess lower par numbers pretty much when my acros do well. Probably. I think that's what he's saying, right? Because LED people shoot
Yeah,
for 250 to 350,
right.
and I run mine like a lot of mine are over 400 or
Do you
something. Yeah, I mean, I
go ahead?
definitely think that some of them would do better with lower par. I mean, I know that at least a handful would do better in lower par, but I don't know. Yeah,
So
it's a
are
good
you
question.
actively measuring par in your tanks?
No, the only time I measured par was one time when someone was like, "Here, take this." I don't really feel the need to. I again not trying to bag on LEDs, but like 10 years ago, we didn't care about measuring, or even longer than that. We never cared about measuring par when we were running halides. Even you, when you had those 400 watt metal halides over your 120, like you didn't measure
No.
par and everything did
Yeah.
well. And the same thing around the 2000, the late 2000s when people were running a lot of T5s, like we didn't care about par. We just filled the tank up with light and that was it. That's all that we needed. I feel like measuring par has just really come about because of LEDs. Like that's my opinion of it. Sorry, LED people, but it just seems like a complication that arose because of LEDs.
I never
I don't know. I don't really care about that,
I
to be
never I
honest with
never
you.
thought of it that way. I mean, I personally have never measured par in my tanks, and yeah, it's you're right in terms of running metal halides and whether it's 250 watters or 400 watters. It's just kind of like something. All right, well, I know what's coming out of the light. I know what I got with the bulbs. It's not rocket science. So you're basically
Right.
looking at the tank, you're looking at the corals, and things look healthy and good, then you roll with it. But I guess if there's some corals that are not looking good, then you got to kind of like investigate. And that actually leads me to another question because you've probably done at least one video on this topic in terms of being able to move around frags that you've planted in your display tanks, right? So you've got this really unique system where you've pretty much can swap out a frag on one side of the tank with another side of the tank without taking it off the rock.
Right. Yeah, I guess it's sort of like a pegging
Right.
system that I kind of started doing. I started doing it in 2014, and yeah, I mean, it's just a necessity. It's just like what you said. It goes along the same topics of, um, if you notice a coral needs more, or you think a coral needs more or less light, you got to move it. And our traditional ways of mounting corals is a pain in the
I
butt.
know.
And I've done it before. Snails knock it off, and fish knock it off, or when it grows big, it just falls off, and that's just not that's just not an ideal way of mounting corals, in my opinion. So that was just my solution to a problem in this hobby. But I did make a video about it, and there are definitely benefits to being able to move your corals around easily. Number one is like you just need to balance the colors a little bit better sometimes. Sometimes you just need to move it for better health or better color, or sometimes it's easier to frag a colony when you can take it out of the water. You frag a colony that's stuck to a rock. The frag often falls and you can never find it again. So yeah, it's just a necessity, and I found a solution for it.
No, it's really pretty cool. I mean, I've never done anything like pegging in terms of moving stuff around. I think a lot of folks will put frags on a frag rack in a tank and just kind of leave it on that frag rack, or maybe put it on the bottom of the tank or what have you on a rack and kind of see how things do, and then decide whether or not to keep it in the tank or maybe move it up a little bit on the frag rack. But at least with your system, it's kind of like natural, and if it takes hold, it takes hold. But if it doesn't, you've got that flexibility to be able to move it around, which I think is a really neat idea. So Seed Dweller has a question. He says, this is interesting. Hey, Abe. Hey, Abe, what do you think of vendors or people who sell frags that don't represent what they look like in real life? You could take the fifth if you want. I don't know, but
Yeah, it's obviously a sensitive topic, and I don't know, man. I guess everyone's gonna do their own thing. It's I don't know
it's
what to say.
marketing.
Yeah, I mean, there's always two sides of the story, right? But I guess overall, kind of, I guess, sort of punting or overall, like I mean, that's not fine. It's not fine for me if I'm a customer. But I think for someone like me who's been I'm not some god or whatever, but since I've been in the hobby long enough, and I do take pictures of corals and I keep corals, and I think that I can pull out pretty decent colors. Someone like me, I have a pretty good idea of what picture is real and what picture is not. And unfortunately, for folks who are new in the hobby, they can hardly tell. They don't know what's heads or tails. But
Yeah. Well, here, go
I
ahead.
think I was just gonna say a good rule is like if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. But I guess I do want to say one more thing about that is, people fudge their pictures all the time, but in reality, it's just if they do it too much, obviously that's just a poor, business motto. I, they're probably not going to last in the hobby that long. If these people do last in the hobby for that long, it's probably because they're constantly getting. This is just my theory, but they probably just keep getting like new customers rather than repeat
Yeah.
customers. Because if you represent your stuff clear, honestly as much as possible, then you're probably going to get a lot of repeat customers. Whereas the other dudes are probably not going to. And but I guess there's another point that I want to make. Sorry, it's that definitely very difficult, like getting the color right in the picture, and sort of getting that translated to the other person's tank, because there are like so many factors that go into what that coral looks like on your screen. First of all, you have the different screens, whether you're looking at on a phone or an old laptop, and then you have all the different parameters that can affect colors, and then you have the different lighting and the different lighting that the picture was taken under. Then you have the different cameras, and there are just so many factors to absolutely get it perfect is kind of a stretch. So in a way, buying corals that you see from pictures online is definitely a risk. And yeah, and it's hard. You probably the best way to buy corals is to see it in person and judge it from there. But your selection is going to be crappy. But anyway,
Do
that's my
you
take on it.
any in-person sales? Or are you pretty much 100% online sales?
I'm pretty much I'm pretty much 100% online. I used to sell locally, but it's just easier to sell online.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into it. I'll take the
You're
fifth
gonna
on
take the fifth on that?
I'll just say
I was gonna say
I'll just say my.
I was gonna say San Diego. At least you've got other reef keepers around you. I live in Vermont. There's like nobody here. I'm like 100%. Actually, I've got a couple of local customers, but it's mostly online and stuff. Um, So here's a lighting question for you. In terms of this is from sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. Reef. Mary Reef. I don't know how to pronounce that. Can you ask Abe? Does he believe corals need white light, or can they do better in blue light? What's his experience?
Oh, they definitely need white light for health, in my opinion. Recently, I've added a, I don't know if you, anyway, it doesn't matter. I recently added a 6500 Kelvin T5 to my 8 bulb setup, and it's definitely white, and it looked yellow to my eyes at first. But within a couple weeks, the health of my corals was so much better because before that, I was running a lot of blue plus, and I didn't have a lot of white light. But since adding that, my corals look so much better.
All right, man. Let's kind of get into a discussion about parameters and what have you. What do you like to run your tanks in terms of nutrients like nitrates, phosphates, and then we can kind of get into the alkalinity, calcium, magnesium. What do you like to do there, Abe, in terms of target parameters?
Uh, I like to keep. I'm laughing because everybody has like their own little opinion, and so this is just my own opinion. But I like to keep my nitrate and phosphate as low as possible, and the main reason for that is because, in my experience, or it's my belief that my corals color up better with lower nitrate and
And when
lower
you say
phosphate.
what's
And
lower nitrate and phosphate in your opinion?
well, see, I don't even test anymore. For nitrate, I've always used correct. I've always used regular test kits. I never use anything, good, I guess. But I've always got zero on my nitrate test kits. So I just stopped testing. It's just a waste of time and money. Um, as far as phosphate goes, I used to check that all the time, and I used to use, the electronic checkers, and I don't know what I used to just, I never really aimed for anything. Anyway, the point is, the point is, see, this is just I run ROFOS because I believe in extracting as much phosphate as possible. And there's definitely this. People definitely say nowadays, like you shouldn't take out all the phosphate. You should have some, and yeah, that's probably true. But I personally don't. I personally don't think I will ever get to zero phosphate as long as I have a normal fish load and I'm feeding the fish, decently. So I really don't, because a lot of people are hesitant to run ROFOS or phosphate removers. And but that doesn't scare me because I made this whole nutrient video. I don't think nutrients is simply, or I should say it this way, the amount of nutrients that your corals get isn't as simple as that test kit results. The the amount of nutrients that your corals get, it's a very dynamic process. And in my opinion, the test kits, that result is just a snapshot of a very dynamic process. So it doesn't really tell you the whole story. That's my opinion of it.
Yeah,
Anyway.
Greg Carroll agrees with you. He says he's fine with zero. And so you referred to feeding your fish, right? And you have a what would you say in your 120 you had 14 fish, or was that in your 140?
Uh, yeah, 14 in the 140, about 12 in my
Right.
120. It's an estimate because I'm not sure. Because a lot of them are damsels and they just kill each other. Like in the 120, I think I had like 18, but I don't see that many damsels anymore. So I think I have about
So
12 fish.
besides feeding your fish, I mean, do you feed your fish, a lot? Do you feed any, coral supplements? I see that Bobby's Reef Aquariums is asking your opinion about aminos. So do you feed any coral food or aminos on top of fish food?
No, I don't. I definitely tried that stuff out though. I tried aminos, I tried coral foods. I never really wanted to like spot feeding acropora because it doesn't look like they eat it. So I stopped doing that. But yeah, I tried like broadcast feeding coral food and aminos. For me, in my experience, aminos is so in my tank, when I dose aminos, it's like cyano in a bottle for me. That stuff is just bad for my skin for some reason. Not saying it won't work in yours, but in mine, I just break out in cyano like within the next couple of days if I keep doing it. So
Yeah, that
yeah, I don't believe in that stuff. I just believe in feeding the fish, and I don't. There's this saying where people people say, oh, corals eat fish poop or all they need is fish poop. I don't think that's real. I've never seen a coral polyp close around some fish poop, but because it's a lot more complicated than that, right? The fish poop is actually releasing
Right.
nutrients, and that's what the corals take in through their membranes. They're not actually eating the fish poop. But yeah, I don't know. Did I answer your question?
I believe so. Any special kind of fish food? Do you have your own blend?
No, no, I don't have my own blend. But what I feed my fish is sort of always changing. Like before, I would like maybe 6 months ago, I was dosing a lot of pellets and a lot of, or dosing. I was feeding a lot of pellets and flakes, but that was I just didn't like the way my corals looked, and so I've got off of. So currently, I stopped feeding anything processed, believe it or not. So right now, as of this moment, I only feed frozen food or seaweed. And it's just another experiment. I'm always experimenting with those types of things, but I think that just by messing with my fish food, I can adjust how my corals look. I don't need to dose amino acids or some special coral food because I can do everything that I need to do with just adjusting my fish feedings, whether it's how much I feed or the type of food that I feed them. But since I've started just feeding the natural foods, all the only frozen foods and only seaweed, my corals actually look better I think, compared to when I was feeding pellets and all that processed stuff. So we'll see. It's just an
Yeah,
experiment.
we're getting some comments here. Percy Adams, who I believe said he's hello from Tahiti. That's awesome. Watching from Tahiti is how do you get those colors with zero nitrates and zero phosphates? And we're getting another question from Mark Leong. Abe, please share how do you get such high polyp extension on your SPS corals all the time? So you're getting some comments there, Abe, with these very low nutrient levels in terms of the great colors and the polyp extension.
Yeah.
What's the ticket there? It's just kind of like what you've been talking about in terms of the way you run systems.
Yeah, I wish I had a good, scientific reasoning behind it, but I don't. My corals just do better with low nutrients. I would like to say that and that's not something that I've like developed in the last couple of years. This has been my the whole time I've been successful with Acropora. Always low nutrients have brought out the best colors for me. So it's not something that you could move me off my position. You know what I mean? Because sometimes at times when I've tried to go higher nutrients, things ended up dying. It could be that my corals are just used to that, and that's the reason they look good. I don't know. But yeah, I just don't have a good answer because there are definitely people who like to run higher nutrients and who have great colors, but I don't have a good answer for that. As far as go ahead.
Percy is wondering how many times a day do you feed your fish?
Oh, I feed them once, but I do feed them heavy. So I don't know how to quantify that for you to understand, but I do feed them a lot. If you saw my fish, they're very fat. And I should say this, it usually takes about 15 minutes for all the food to go away.
Oh,
That's how
really?
much I feed. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And Russell Chili's is wondering, has Abe ever used a product like ChemiClean? So you mentioned, cyano and what have you. Whenever you get some problematic algae, have you ever used any chemicals to get rid of it?
Nope, I probably never will either. I don't know what's in that stuff, and I'm not dissing that company, but I don't believe in quick fixes, right? This hobby is like this is just that saying, nothing good happens quick in this hobby. It's totally true. I'm just not all about quick fixes. To me, cyano and nuisance algae, they're just really a manifestation of something that's not right in your tank.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you just don't throw a band-aid on like something wrong that's in the inside of your body. That's just my
Yep.
opinion of it. But I actually recently had cyano in my frag tank, the one that I didn't mention. It was bad. Like I had bad cyano for like 5 months, all over the place, all over the frag rack. And I didn't put anything in there. I just fought through it. I just manually removed it. I siphoned this stuff out. I try to get my parameters right. I just do what I did normally, I guess. And it eventually went away.
Right, right. I think a lot of times that's what I'll find. Like in my frag tank, I'll sometimes just have to really, if any problematic algae pops up, I spend a lot of time manually removing it, and try not to go the chemical route. And I agree with you. Chemicals is a major last resort in my opinion, and it's always best to try to go the natural route. And something is out of balance, something is out of whack, probably with the nitrate and phosphate ratio. But that's usually and I also like to pull out the frag racks in my frag tanks and siphon all that detritus out, because it's not easy to keep that when you have egg crate, to keep that detritus out of that tank, even with good flow. I mean, I've got two of those frag tanks that I talked about. I've got two MP40s in each one of those frag tanks, and one's 4 foot long by 2 foot, and the other's 5 foot long by 2 foot wide. So, I think having a good amount of flow in a tank that you're keeping SPS coral is a big part of having success. Just looking at some of the other questions here. Abe, this is St. Nova. Abe, how long have you had an acro just sit there twiddling its thumbs doing nothing? So I guess maybe the question is, maybe it's encrusting and it's not growing any branches, but you actually did a video on this one, right? I think so. You did something about, you did a video that you had some corals that were doing nothing, and you started snipping some branches and you started seeing growth, where you were cutting the branches, and then you were also talking about placing frags on edges of rock to try to promote growth.
Yeah, I think I know what St. Nova's asking now. It's like, how long do you wait before you start messing with the acro? I think about 6 months is how long I wait. I mean, if it's I should say if it's encrusting, I'll give it 6 months to start growing branches. If it's not growing branches by 6 months, then I'm going to start thinking of moving it, either to stronger lighting, less light, or just different kind of lighting. I'll move it to my other tank. So yeah, that's the answer to that. But yeah, you're referring to my growth video. Yeah, that was just some tips on what I thought would improve growth. But yeah, nipping the tips, it's not a secret, sometimes stimulates growth. But in my experience, that only helps when when part of the colony is growing somewhere else. Like if you nip, for me, if I nip a colony that's just encrusting, it doesn't do anything. But
we have a question from the Art of War. What about tank temperature? I run mine 75 to 76-ish, and everything does really well, but slow growth overall. Could this temp be an issue? That does sound kind of on the low end of for a reef tank, 75 to 76.
Yeah, I agree. I run mine over, about 79.5-ish. But I mean, Art of War, who knows? You're not going to know until you try it, right? I mean, all tanks are different, but so just try it. I mean, just bump it up slowly and see if you notice a
What
difference.
about water changes, Abe? What do you do in terms of water changes for your systems?
Yeah, water changes is definitely something that I would like to do more of, but it's not always the most practical thing to do. But right now I do about 20% every 2 weeks. I just don't do it more often because I'm limited to, well, being in California and there's a water shortage. So we save all the wastewater and I use that to clean stuff off. But that thing is only 55 gallons. So when that thing is full, I don't want to make more water. And I don't know. And the salt is obviously expensive. So I'm a big believer in water changes though. If I could do them and they're cheaper, if I could do them more often, I would do them more often.
What salt brand do you use?
I use Red Sea Coral
Okay.
Pro. So I've bounced around. 10 years ago I was using Reef crystals, and I was using that for a long time, and then I tried Brightwell, which was fine. Then I tried Tropic Marin Pro, and then I'm back on a Red Sea Coral Pro.
Yeah, I've kind of jumped around myself too. I for years was using Tropic Marin Pro, ESV's salt, then Instant Ocean. Then I went back to Tropic Marin. Now I'm back to Instant Ocean because it's reasonably priced, and I get
sure.
I get some decent results with it. I mean, have you seen any major changes when you change salt brands?
Yeah, for the negative. um, Yeah, I switched to one company, and I saw negative results, but I don't really want to say who they were because people use it
Yeah.
just fine. So I don't know what it was, but I mean, it was probably just the change of salts, not necessarily the brand that pissed the corals off. So yeah,
Let's talk about the bucket refugium. Now, what struck me as interesting is that you use you're using macro, but you're also using GFO, and and
yes,
GFO can, if you use too much of it, strip out some of the valuable trace elements that helps the Chaeto grow. So, explain that dynamic in terms of using both and how you use both. I mean, are you constantly using the Roa Phos? Is that a 24/7 thing, or is it just at certain times when you see levels maybe getting a little, something getting a little out of whack?
yeah. No, it's definitely 24/7. I do hear of people or read of people doing that where they're like testing their phosphate and running it when they need it. That's a lot of work to me. I wouldn't do that. But yeah, like I said, it's like I don't think I'll ever hit zero technically, as long as I'm feeding the fish and I have that bio load. Um, but yeah, I do run that and the Chaeto and the bucket refugium. Actually, though, that's a good question because I had been recently sort of playing around with the photo period on my bucket refugium to see what kind of effect that has on the different colors of the coral. Um, yeah, it's a good question. I don't know, but I think that this is kind of a theory that I'm starting to sort of develop in my head. I probably shouldn't even say, but since I brought it up, but I almost feel like there's probably a very how do I say this? Like to tailor the corals, their colors to our liking. As I said earlier, it's not as simple as a stupid test kit result. You know what I mean? Like that's too simple for a very complicated dynamic. And but I actually feel like there is probably a better way to tailor the colors of our corals to our liking. And that's one thing is I think it's messing around with the photo period of your refugium. But I'll
How
leave it at
long?
that because I don't want
Go
to.
ahead.
No, I just said I don't want to. I don't want to like speak too early because I'm still kind of brewing this theory in my head, and I'll probably make a video on it if it comes to fruition. But I guess the bottom line is like the test kit result is it's just too simple of a way to think about nutrients in the reef aquarium.
What? How long do you run your lights on the bucket refugium? How many hours?
So actually, in the 120, I'm only running it for 6 hours a night
Oh,
now.
6.
But in the 140,
Hmm.
yeah, but in the 140, I run it for 12
Okay.
hours. Those, yeah, I run those tanks very similar, but for some reason, the Chaeto doesn't grow as well in the 120 as it does in the 140. That's why I reduced the photo period because it's like, why light it when it doesn't grow that well? Um, but I think that I know the reason why there's that discrepancy of Chaeto growth between both tanks is because the 140 is technically newer. I just recently switched out the frag rack for that rock, so the rock is a little fresh. But that sort of speaks to how important an established tank is, biological filtration because it makes all the difference in terms of nutrient control.
I tell you, man, I'm digging your 140 gallon tank, and it actually my new tank, my new 225 gallon tank is a similar design, and my new tank is going to be 6 foot long by 3 foot wide by 20 inches tall, and I think your 140 is 3 foot wide by 5 foot long by 16 inches tall. Is that what it right? And I like that. I like the lagoon style, and my tank is going to be similar in terms of kind of like a grow out tank for SPS, right? And but what I like about your tank is that it looks really cool. It looks really natural. What are your thoughts in terms of all this interesting aquascaping that's going on? The negative aquascape, the negative space aquascape (NSA). I don't know if you've been following that stuff. BRS has been doing a lot of featuring that sort of live rock in terms of the aquascaping, and it's just very minimalistic and very branchy and getting very creative. I mean, it seems like it's a lot of work, and I'm sure if you have the talent to pull that off, it would be awesome. But I think one of the reasons why I wanted to go with the lagoon style tank and not have a very tall tank is because then you really don't have to get that fancy with the Aquascape, right? I think, you know, especially if you wanted to have an SPS dominant, SPS kind of like grow out tank. For me, I think it's going to work just fine in terms of having that width, which is very important. You know, I think in terms of a reef tank, to have that depth of of 3 feet is just great in terms of being able to play around with stuff. But what are your thoughts in terms of aquascaping and all the creativity that you can do with dry rock?
Well, I agree with you. Like, and it's like almost 100% that the tank size and dimensions should sort of determine what your aquascape looks like, right? Like if you said you have a wide tank like that, it's going to look nice when you're staring down the end, and it's almost better to have the aquascape just flat, so you can see all the contrasting colors down the line. So yeah, I mean that's what I believe in. But yeah, as far as like bonsai aquascapes and having a taller tank, like I'm totally for it. If you're that artistic, go for it. My whole thing with aquascape though is I'm not really the reason why I'm not into like minimalistic looks and just not a lot of live rock and all that. It's not because of it doesn't. It's not because I dislike the look. It's actually because I don't feel. I have this sort of weird theory. It's another one of my theories that can't be proven. But in my opinion, biological filtration in the tank is like so much better than stuffing some biological filtration in the sump. So for me, I'm all about having enough live rock in the display because photosynthetic biofiltration to me is very important versus just throwing a bunch of ceramic blocks in the sump. To me, that's not the same, but who knows?
Yeah, I mean,
I can't prove that.
people definitely seem to have success with the ceramic blocks in the sump. I've never gone that route, but yeah, I think if you could have live rock in the display, I agree with you in terms of having the light and the biodiversity. I think that's going to be a better way to go. At least you can get there quicker, I would think, but I can't prove that. It just seems anecdotally that folks, that start tanks with live rock versus dry rock can get there quicker in terms of an SPS dominant tank versus a dry rock only tank. But that's my experience and some also experiences that I've heard from friends that have tried the dry rock after using live rock forever. All right, so I'm just panning around here, looking at the chat. So, folks, definitely chime in with any more questions, and I'm just trying to peruse the comments here. Abe, one other thing I wanted to ask you in terms of, when you gave us the tour, the tank tour, both of the your the equipment that you use, it was pretty basic, setup. So there wasn't a lot of I didn't see a lot of the latest, the greatest in terms of the technology, right? I think it's just you got a basic setup and it works. What are your thoughts in terms of all the different types of equipment out there that can be utilized to help run a tank? You've got alkalinity monitors, you've got controllers. You use an Apex, right? But I'm assuming you don't get too fancy with the Apex. What's your thought in terms of technology in the hobby and how that gets utilized? Are you just kind of try to keep away from that sort of thing? Is that just something that's not one of the tools in your toolkit?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could sum up what I'm about to say as keep it as simple as possible. But as far as you brought up alkalinity and all the different testers they have nowadays, in my opinion, like all that stuff is taking something very simple way too far and making it too complicated. Because I have my undergraduate degree in chemistry. I'm not saying I know a lot about chemistry, but titrating to find that value of alkalinity, that's very basic to get that. That's like simple chemistry. That's like high school chemistry, you know what I mean? And I get it, that it could be a little difficult to know whether it's like purple or pink, you know what I mean? But as long as you're consistently saying, okay, no, that's my purple or that's my pink, you're going to be fine. But I think electronic testers and all these other crazy things, they just take it a little too far, because now you're adding like a light in there that measures the degree of pinkness of the solution. It just makes something a lot more complicated than it needs to be. The chemistry involved in testing stuff is very basic. So I don't know. That's my opinion.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I think I, I I use technology if it can be helpful, that's great. But I don't really like to lean on it too heavily. You know, I do use a controller, and I use it to just really primarily to alarm me if there's anything going on and it's out of whack in terms of water on the floor, or if the temperature gets way too hot, or stuff like that. I don't utilize a controller a lot in terms of controlling things. I mean, I do have like a skimmer, a float switch in my skimmer, which if the cup gets filled up, then that float switch gets tripped and it shuts off the skimmer pump. So I've got a couple of things like that in terms of fail-safe types of things, but I don't believe in having a lot of moving parts in a reef tank. I think the more complicated you make a reef tank, then the more points of failure that can exist, and so you can kind of get yourself into a little bit of trouble if you go too deep into it. I mean, I think we do have similar philosophies there. Saint Nova, I think I've saw this question before. Is asking if you have any aptasia, and if you do, how have you gotten rid of it?
That's like yeah. I do actually. I think I got it from. I either got it from two. I added some zoes to my tank at one point, and it could have also been from the Chaeto. So I do have aptasia. I think I'm no aptasia expert, but Bergia nudibranchs seem to be one of the best options out there. And I've actually just stuck some in my tank recently, so that's what I'm doing to get rid of them. But yeah, those guys are
I've
buggers for
had
sure.
a lot of success using peppermint shrimp. I think those are good too. I put a few of those in there. Um, Percy Adams, hey Abe, just to say your last vid is a masterpiece.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, I don't know, man. I was just trying something different. I guess my YouTube style is always evolving. But lately, or in the beginning of starting YouTube, I used to think that I used to have this thought in my head like, oh, I have to show myself in the video, because people want to see who I am, and that's you watch all these popular YouTubers, not reefers in general, but like General Marvels and some of these legends like Casey Neistat. They're the actual subject matter of the video. But lately, I always thought that I need to be in the video in order to grow big. That was sort of my thought. But recently I've been watching some other channels, and I sort of realized that, like, man, this is a reefing channel. It's not like I don't have some like bubbly personality, you know what I mean? If anything, people are here to see the corals, and I think that well, I don't know, that's just something that I'm thinking about. Like, that's the subject matter that people are actually interested in, not me. I mean, at least I don't
I
know.
don't know.
What do you think about that?
I hear you. It is kind of like an evolving thing. You try different things, try different formats, and sometimes you gotta like roll with something else and see how that flies. But that's part of the whole creativity process, right? I mean, I think it definitely is important to show yourself at times, but maybe at other times you got to be a little discreet. I don't know.
Yeah, who
Who the heck
knows, right?
knows?
Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
Mary Reef. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. Mere Reef. I don't know how you would pronounce that, Abe. But can you ask Abe what's the secret to coloration? What are the things that influence color, like the home wrecker and Walt Disney? What do you think? What do you think about that, Abe? Is
For
that
me,
everything you've been talking about in terms of color?
low, yeah, yeah, low nutrients. No, no, yeah, I mean that's part of my own theory, definitely. But obviously, it's really, I guess. Well, let me answer it this way, because people sometimes ask me like, "What are your secrets?" And it's like, bro, there are no secrets, man. Everything that I do, yeah, I mean that's an important point. Is that I wanted to say is that everything that I thought is important, I have said in a video at some point. And that should say something, because I only have like 30 freaking videos out there. I don't have a lot of them. And so I guess my point is that there are no secrets. It's what you hear all the time: stability, you know, keeping your nutrients in control, having a good spectrum with your lighting. With also with lighting, you got to have good coverage. I don't. There's no secret, bro. I mean, you know, like I said in my dosing video, there's no magical amino acid or coral food that I'm using, bro. I'm just doing regular stuff. But patience is another
Yeah,
big one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know, Keith. What are your thoughts on that?
Hold it, I'm interviewing you. No, I'm just kidding. No, I agree. I think patience is a big one. I think do not make a lot of changes. You know, if you see certain things and you know, if your alkalinity is going up and up and up and I just don't like to make change unless things are really spiraling out of control or what have you. So I think you know, patience, stability. I think what you said in terms of keeping nutrients in control. You don't want you know, that's just a bad thing in terms of getting a nutrient spike and getting the problematic algae, and then you know then you're fighting that fight. But lighting is very important. You know, I've had great luck with metal halide lighting. I think you got to have a good solid calcium and alkalinity supplementation system all set up. Um, and I think
True.
you know you got to keep up with the maintenance. You can't neglect a reef tank. This is not a lazy man's hobby. So I always you know really try to stick to my maintenance schedule and keep the tank humming along because you know all you need to do is kind of neglect a return pump or something else in terms of that piece of equipment, and you get equipment failure, and then that's just going to snowball into something really bad. And so I think sometimes
Yeah.
maintenance really gets overlooked in reef keeping, and you know it's not glamorous, but it's something you got to do. So,
Totally.
all right, man, we're getting that. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I saw a question that was asked earlier and I forgot to answer it, but someone was asking about how I get my polyp extension. That's another question that I get asked regularly, and I really don't do anything special for that. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest with you. Just have a healthy corals. I mean, I think part of it is having clean water and low nutrients. That's just kind of my opinion on it. But I honestly wanted to do a video on what would give you better polyp extension. But one thing that's discouraging me is that Keith ReefBum has a nice video on that, and he pretty much said everything that I could think of. So go back, I don't know, it was 2 or 3 years ago, Keith,
Oh
when you
yeah,
made
the
that
polyp
video.
extension.
That's a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it has like 30,000 something views. That's a good video to watch. I mean, I probably don't have much to add to that. The only thing I'd probably add, I can't remember if you said it, was having clean water, I think, um, helps with pulp extension.
Yeah, there's a number of factors. I think you know flow is definitely something that you know, and randomized flow I think is always good. You know, you have that Tunzi wave maker in that one tank, and that's you know that's a nice surge effect in terms of moving water around and yeah, I think you know the other thing that I would bring up in terms of having success with an SPS tank is you know once that tank starts to kind of get grow out a little bit, you know you got to be proactive about keeping that thing trimmed back because as soon as you start getting certain corals to grow, then it's going to cut back in the circulation and you know the tank will look great. All right, I got a great full looking tank and it's awesome and what have you. But you know, dude, that's going to turn and kind of that's going to kind of get bad in a few months because you know things are going to start dying at the base of your corals and other corals that are getting choked out by certain corals are not going to be happy. So I think that's also very key is to make sure that you're keeping a you know trimming that tank and to make sure that you continue to allow those corals to have the flow that they need. That's an important thing. You know, and I
Yes,
think
sir.
you know another thing, and I don't know what your thoughts are, but there you know there's also certain types of corals that can be very aggressive in terms of you know especially in Montipora and even encrusting Montes. So I think you know those are great corals to start off a tank with and to make sure that the tank is you know can support and be a healthy SPS tank in terms of Montiporas like Digis and what have you. Those are very simple corals to keep. But you also have to be very careful about those things because they can grow fast, really, really fast. And you know, so I think that's also a part of it in terms of having success with an SPS tank is the selection of the corals that you are, you know, keeping in that tank. And, you know, you got to be very cognizant of being, you know, placing aggressive coral, you know, next to some non-aggressive corals. But that's, I think, your pegging system's a really cool system to be able to move things around like that. But do you ever think about that in terms of when you're planning out a tank in terms of the aggressiveness of a coral in terms of how fast they grow and where they're getting placed, or do you try to avoid those corals in your tank?
No, I mean, I definitely have Montes, and you're right, they are pretty aggressive. Um, yeah, I mean, encrusting ones, definitely the encrusting Montes, I wouldn't just put them on the rock because they just grow buck wild. But that's, yeah, but you're right, that's where that pegging system comes into play because I'll just give them their own little rock, and once they start overgrowing the edge, then I'll just pull it off. So,
All right, a couple of rapid fire questions for me. What's your dream tank look like, or do you have one already?
no, I don't have one actually. But you know, obviously it's going to be big. Probably one that's like 4 feet wide. That way I can have probably all the different lighting if I wanted to, halides, LEDs, and T5s. But it's not going to be so big to where it's such a chore to take care of it. But it's probably going to be around the, you know, somewhere around the area of 600
And
gallons.
how far off in the future is that tank?
Oh, I mean, it's as far off as me buying a new house. So it's very far. I just don't have the space for it. So it's very far.
So if you had to pick like your favorite SPS coral, what would it be?
Oh man, I don't know. Well, I don't know. It's a hard question. I do have a lot of
Pick one.
favorites though. Oregon
You like
tort.
the Oregon tort? You and me both,
Yeah,
man. I love that coral. That coral is like the bluest coral around. It is awesome.
yeah. I like sometimes I'm on like on Reef to Reef and I'm hearing about people talking about, oh, this color is blue, so blue it beats the Oregon tort. And I gotta tell you, man, I tried a lot of those corals and
Yeah,
there's
no.
no way they even beat
It's
Oregon.
almost like it's got a fake blue pigment in it or something. It's so freaking blue. What about the Tyree Purple Monster? You ever had that in a tank?
No, but I keep hearing about that one. I heard it's nice though.
I've had big colonies of that I grew out of frags in my old 225-gallon tank, and I do have a frag that I've been growing out on the in the 187-gallon tank that has just pretty much been encrusting and doing nothing, and it's frustrating because the frag itself has not grown upward at all, and it's just gotten fatter and so encrusted to the rock that I believe it's almost impossible to frag that tip. If I frag that tip, I'm going to get a 1/4 inch piece of, you know, I'm going to get a little nub. But I don't know, maybe I should do that and try to plant it in the new tank when it's ready to rock and roll. Let's see here. What else do we got? So listen, Abe, man, it's we've been talking for like an hour and 15 minutes. Anything else that you wanted to talk about that I haven't asked you, or any other comments that you have?
No, no, I mean, I think we covered a lot of it, or the main stuff. Yeah, it was good. And I just want to say thanks for all the support, guys. And thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no. So for you folks that haven't checked out Abe's website, it's coral.euphoria.com. Oh, I forgot to ask you, how did you come up with the name?
I don't know, man. It's not even all that special. I mean, it doesn't have any special place in my heart. Well, before it didn't. It was just something I came up with. Nowadays when you're trying to start something these days online, you should check all the platforms, right? If that name is taken on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, or you have to see if that .com is taken up. So it's not the easiest thing to come up with a name because you're quite restricted.
Yeah.
So that's just one that I came up with, and I gotta say, like I never really liked it all that much, but I don't think it's something I could change. It's probably not a good idea to change it
Yeah,
right
you
now
don't want to do
since
any
you
rebranding
know.
right now. I think you're probably doing pretty well in terms of selling frags and what have you. I would assume. Um, All right, man. Listen, I want to thank you again, Abe. This was a lot of fun for me, and I really enjoyed talking SPS with you. And hopefully you will join us again in the future as a guest on the live stream.
Yeah, man, sounds good. Thanks.
So I got another show next Sunday, September 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Cindy from Reef. Cindy, I'm gonna have to ask you how to pronounce this when I have you on the show. Reefer GRRL, Reefer Girl, maybe that's what that's short for. Reefer Girl, maybe. Anyway, so Cindy's gonna be joining me next Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And anyway, man, all right, Abe, listen, be safe, be well, and everybody else do the same out there. These are certainly interesting times. So till next time, we'll see you soon.
Take care, guys.